This is a war we should never have gotten into. This is a war right now which has already resulted in thousands of people being killed. In Lebanon, you had 1 million people who are displaced. I hope it ends as soon as possible.
Senator Bernie Sanders appeared on The Source with Caitlin Collins to lay out his perspective on Donald Trump's actions regarding Iran. In this segment, we're going to break down key clips from that interview, where Sanders shares his concerns about the direction of U.S. foreign policy and the broader implications of the conflict. We'll go through the discussion step by step, looking at how Sanders presents his argument and how the conversation unfolds with Caitlin Collins. I'll also be adding my own analysis and reactions afterward, so we can fully unpack what was said and what it means. Let's dive in and watch it together.
We have some of our top sources here tonight on the show to try to make sense of everything that we're learning in just the last 24 hours alone. And Senator Bernie Sanders will join me here on set in just a moment. But first, tonight, CNN has learned that the administration is preparing to deploy 1,000 soldiers with the Army's elite 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East. That's in addition to the thousands of Marines and sailors who are already on the way, even as we're hearing from President Trump sending messages like this one from the Oval Office today.
Well, I think we're going to end it. I can't tell you for sure. I don't like to say this. We've won this. This war has been won.
Of course, one might ask, if the president does believe this war has been won, why thousands more U.S. service members are being sent to the region tonight? That question for the president comes as he also says that the United States and Iran are discussing potential peace talks.
We're in negotiations right now. They're doing it along with Marco, JD. We have a number of people doing it. And the other side, I can tell you, they'd like to make a deal.
There's been reports that the vice president is leading those negotiations. Is that true?
Well, he's involved in them. JD is involved, and Marco's involved, and Jared Kushner's involved, very smart guy, and Steve Witkoff, smart guy, is involved, and I'm involved.
As the president cites everyone who is helping with these talks, we do know tonight that there have been communications between the United States and Iran through intermediaries about sitting down and talking. And that news came, as in President Trump's telling today, he said it may not have been exactly well received by his Pentagon chief who was in the room.
I said, Pete and General Raisin Kane, I think this thing's going to be settled very soon. Here they go. Oh, that's too bad. Pete didn't want it to be settled.
And when Secretary Pete Hegseth, whom the president was referring to there, was asked to give his update on the war from the Oval Office today, this statement from Secretary Hegseth stood out.
And that's why we see ourselves as part of this negotiation as well. We negotiate with bombs.
Apparently, those bombs, which are still dropping tonight, have not stopped the Iranians yet, according to President Trump, from sending him what he has described, mysteriously so, and White House officials have declined to elaborate in the hours since this comment, after he said the Iranians sent him a very big present.
They did something yesterday that was amazing, actually. They gave us a present, and the present arrived today. It was a very big present worth a tremendous amount of money. And I'm not going to tell you what that present is, but it was a very significant prize. And they gave it to us, and they said they were going to give it, so that meant one thing to me, we're dealing with the right people.
Is that nuclear related?
No, it wasn't nuclear related. It was oil and gas related.
And joining me tonight is the independent senator of Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders. And thank you, sir, for being here. On the war with Iran, President is talking today about these ongoing talks with Iran. That comes after he was threatening to bomb their power plants and putting deadlines on that. He's now extended it to Friday. When you hear what the White House is saying, do you believe that he's looking for an off-ramp in this war?
There is evidence that, in fact, he is not talking to Iran, that's a lie, stated in order to calm the stock market and to lower oil prices. So I have not a lot of confidence in anything the president says regarding the war. This is a war we should never have gotten into. This is a war right now which has already resulted in thousands of people being killed. In Lebanon, you had 1 million people who are displaced. I hope it ends as soon as possible.
I mean, I think that's the real question. But I mean, the president said today that when he told Secretary Pete Hegseth the war might be winding down, the president said he was disappointed in that. What do you make of that?
He was disappointed in what?
He said that Hegseth was disappointed when the president told him the war may be winding down soon.
I frankly don't believe much of what the president says, so no comment on that.
If they come to Congress and ask for $200 billion,
Well,
What's
I
your
support that?
response to that?
Absolutely not. In fact, we're going to bring forth a joint resolution of disapproval in a couple of weeks, which will stop the 20,000 bombs that are going to Israel and the bulldozers that are going to Israel to knock down homes and buildings on the West Bank. So no, I will not support funding for that war.
The president has heavily praised Israel and talked about what an ally they've been in this. Obviously, one thing that's really affected Americans, and I'm sure you've heard this from your constituents, is gas prices here at home, energy prices, what we've been seeing with this global energy crisis that's playing
and the
out.
answer is yes, of course. Gas prices are rising. People are deeply concerned. This is a president who's supposed to be worrying about affordability. But let's put it into a broader context. The United States of America started this war. It launched an initiative, a unilateral attack along with Israel, which assassinated the leaders of those countries, and starting a situation now which is causing massive, massive suffering in the Middle East. And whether we want to be working with Israel, which has devastated the people of Gaza, 10% of the people of Gaza are dead or wounded, I'm not quite sure those are the alliances, those are the allies we need to be working with.
In my view, Democrats could benefit from adopting a more unified and direct message, similar to what independent Senator Bernie Sanders is expressing here. The core argument he's making is straightforward, questioning whether the U.S. should have entered this conflict at all and whether continued involvement makes sense. While his exact wording may vary, the broader point is about rethinking both the war itself and the nature of certain international alliances. The contrast becomes more noticeable when you look at how consistently Republican figures repeat specific talking points. That level of message discipline is something Democrats often lack, which can make their position seem less clear to the public. Instead of a unified stance, the response sometimes turns into a more cautious critique, focusing on how decisions were made rather than whether they should have been made at all. There's also a political dimension to this, especially when looking ahead. Figures like Josh Shapiro, who may have future national ambitions, tend to take positions that align with more traditional foreign policy views. However, it remains to be seen how those positions resonate with voters, particularly as public opinion continues to evolve. Ultimately, the argument here is that clearer, more consistent messaging, like what Bernie Sanders is offering, could make a stronger impact in shaping the debate. Whether people agree or disagree with that stance, it highlights the importance of clarity and cohesion in political communication.
As someone who has run for president before and been a candidate, is this something that you think will become a test for Democrats, a litmus test for Democrats in terms of the alliance with Israel?
I think it's not only Democrats. I think all over the country, people are saying, wait a minute, we can't afford housing, we can't afford health care, we can't afford childcare, we can't afford food at the grocery store. And this war now, which will cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, why? Why? To bomb buildings in Tehran, to force 1 million people in Lebanon from their homes. So it's not just progressives and Democrats. I think you have a lot of conservatives saying Trump ran on a campaign saying, I'm going to end endless wars. We've got to invest in America, not on these endless wars. And he went back on his word. So I think the polling suggests that whether you're Republicans, Democrats, this is not a war the American people want.
Yeah, there's a poll that said a lot of Americans think that the White House isn't focused enough on domestic issues.
Yeah, no kidding. Working class people are having a hard time getting by. 60% of our people live in paycheck to paycheck, while Trump and his billionaire friends have never had it so good. And now we're spending what will amount to many hundreds of billions of dollars on a war that should not be fought. The American people are not happy about it.
And of course, they're already getting $1 trillion and Trump wants $1.5 trillion. But they're already getting $1 trillion for the military budget. I don't know why all of the Democrats aren't saying, hey, you've already got $1 trillion. Why are we giving you $200 billion more for a war that 70% of Americans do not want? Of course, the Trump administration doesn't care. This is about their donors. This is about enriching themselves by manipulating the stock market. And the Pete Hegs thing of this is one. Donald Trump lies incessantly, but I think he's probably telling the truth. Donald Trump is when he said that Pete Hegs was disappointed that maybe the war is winding down, which it doesn't look like there's any evidence that it is. And that's because Pete Hegs is a child. He has the mentality of a middle schooler. What he says when negotiate with bombs. What douche Pete Hegs is. And I was thinking about this the other day. Imagine if Donald Trump were the president and Pete Hegs were the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War in World War II. Imagine how that would have gone, and shudder to think about that. But back to Bernie Sanders here. Spot on with his messaging. I love everything that he said here to Caitlin Collins. And as I said before, every single Democrat should be just parroting what Bernie says. That should be the message. Never should have gone into it. We are going to fund it or support it. And we need to be cutting ties with Israel. That should be the messaging of every Democrat. But sadly, we know that's not going to be the case. We're going to get very few Democrats, I fear, in Congress, and especially those wanting to run for president that will be as firm as what Bernie Sanders was here with Caitlin Collins. And I don't know why, because 70% or so of the country are on that side. But let me know in the comments what you think. Do you agree with what Bernie Sanders had to say here to Caitlin Collins? And do you agree with me that Bernie Sanders' messaging should be the Democratic Party's messaging even though Bernie Sanders is an independent? Let me know in the comments what you think. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I am Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next.